And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to OBS Talk Show Presents. I'm your host, Keith Williams. And today, after some delay, we have an author in our midst. His name is Jason Boyce. And the name of his book is Chronic Fatigue Going. We're going to be talking about that today. And little interesting facts about Jason is that there was a study that was done, post-COVID study that was done, and 41 of those COVID patients that was studied show symptoms. He's been a sufferer of, many types of diseases for the past 15 years that has caused chronic fatigue. And we're going to be talking about that today. The reason why, so we're going to be talking about the latest headlines relating to coronavirus disease, COVID-19, on today as well. So Jason, welcome to the show.
Hi, Keith. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. This is great.
So please tell the audience who is Jason Boyce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was born in England, hence the accent, Birmingham, England. And I got a cold or a flu or something when I was in my late 20s. And it transpired that I never actually recovered from this. And my health declined over the years. And I was finally diagnosed with myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is the complex medical name for a more common term, which is chronic fatigue syndrome. And unfortunately, I suffered pretty badly with this to the point where I was almost bedbound, where I couldn't walk, and the doctors couldn't help me. So I decided to research the disease, and I spent many years coming up with or trying out different therapies and different medications. And I finally found a way to get back to health. And over those years, I wrote down everything that helped me in a journal. And about 2 years ago, I decided to turn this journal into a book so I could help other people get over this major symptom of chronic fatigue syndrome. And while I was writing the book, COVID became the thing right at the beginning of starting the book. And it was fairly obvious that I had to rewrite the book to incorporate COVID, and COVID's turned into or transpired that COVID can create something called long COVID in many people. So I rewrote the book to incorporate the therapies that will also help people with long COVID sort of get over long COVID and help them get back to living a relatively normal life. So that's where I am. The book came out about 3 months ago. I've had a lot of very positive reviews, very nice things people have said about it. So I'm just there to help other people get over what I've had to endure for the last 15, 16 years to get over chronic fatigue syndrome. So that's where I am right now. And I'm trying to get the word out there so other people don't have to go through what I went through, which was experimenting with different drugs and different supplements and different therapies to get over this.
You tell us a little bit about what is chronic fatigue syndrome. What are some of the treatments that you have? What are some of the symptoms? And how did you overcome it? There's also another acronym on here on your bio. This is ME. Do you know what that stands for, ME?
Yeah, so ME is myalgic, which means muscle pain, and encephalomyelitis, which is a long word, but it essentially means inflammation of the brain and spinal column. So this is a medical term, and chronic fatigue syndrome, it's believed is caused by chronic inflammation of the brain, essentially. And what causes chronic fatigue syndrome? It's generally agreed, although you'll see in the book that there's lots of different triggers that can cause chronic fatigue syndrome, but it's generally agreed that it's a post-viral malaise issue. So basically you have a virus It knocks you out for a while. And this obviously COVID is a virus. And the malaise issue is this chronic symptoms that may last for months or years. So it's a post-viral malaise problem. That's it. That's essentially what people, sort of agreed upon. So it's an autoimmune disease. So your immune system is just reacting all the time to this latent virus, and it never goes away. And what the book does is provide different therapies to calm down the inflammation, pretty much take the inflammation out of the body, so your body can then resist the autoimmune issues, and you start to feel normal and better and can start living a normal life again. So that's what the book does. There are many different therapies, expounded in this book, which I hope people will explore. Would you like me to go through a couple of them, Keith?
Oh, absolutely. I think people really, need to know that. Go ahead.
One of them is actually a very common supplement that a lot of people take already. It's vitamin D. Now, vitamin D, it's problematic in the fact that historically the recommended daily allowance of vitamin D has been extremely low, to the point where it's pretty useless taking the recommended daily allowance. My research has shown that about 20,000 IUs per day can massively boost the immune system and reduce inflammation. Now, this was backed up by studies that I've read. The latest study, and perhaps the most interesting one, was that people who presented to the emergency room with COVID, who were in, serious trouble, whereby they were at risk of death, this study showed that people who presented to the ER room were 3.4 times more likely to die if they have low vitamin D levels. So getting your vitamin D levels from low, because we don't get it, you actually get it from it's actually a hormone, not a vitamin, and you get it from the sun, generally speaking, and a little bit from food as well. But we just don't get anywhere near enough sun time these days because of sunscreen, and we living indoors, etc. So you have to take it as a supplement. You can overdose on vitamin D, so you have to be careful. 30,000 IUs a day is pretty much the limit, I would say, for most people. But what it does, it boosts your immune system, it reduces inflammation, it provides energy, and it destroys viruses, or it reduces, it's an immunomodulator, which means it helps your immune system adapt to whatever virus is in your body. This is why it's so effective for beating COVID. I wish the CDC had come out and said, will people please take vitamin D supplements? Because this could have reduced the death rate tremendously. So the first line against long COVID and ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome, is to take high dose vitamin D. And there is a chapter on the book about vitamin D.
So, so what do you mean about long COVID? Because I know that, and I have some reports of people, saying that, after they got COVID, that there have been some lingering symptoms, like they may feel fatigue, or they have less energy, or they cannot, they don't have their sense of smell or taste. Mm-hmm. Would that be an example of long COVID, or, so what is long COVID?
Well, long COVID is a post-viral malaise problem. So basically, even though you can have a COVID test and your COVID test will be negative, your immune system believes that the COVID virus is still active in your body. So immune system's constantly reacting to the virus. And what that does, it causes symptoms such as headaches, brain fog, which is a common one, insomnia, which is also common. And perhaps the most common symptom is chronic fatigue, which is the most debilitating, especially when you couple it with insomnia. Of course, you have insomnia and chronic fatigue, then the insomnia makes the fatigue worse, and the fatigue makes the insomnia worse. So they're the common symptoms of long COVID, and that's pretty much how long COVID is diagnosed. So you go to your doctor and say, I think, I've had COVID, I'm not feeling better. And the doctor will say, well, yeah, you probably got an autoimmune response to the COVID virus, even though the virus is no longer active in the system. And this is what long COVID is. And we don't know yet how long COVID lasts for, right? Because COVID's relatively new, you know, the longest probably somebody has long COVID is what, 2 years? So and most people do get better. Most people do actually overcome this over time, like they do with any virus, but there's a certain percentage of the population, their immune system won't be able to deal with it properly, and they'll have an autoimmune system dysregulation, and they'll have chronic inflammation. And you know, unfortunately, they will suffer from long COVID. Now, all the other symptoms are probably going to go away over time. I think, you know, the smell and taste issue, that just takes a long time, but it will come back for most people. So that's not, I don't call that a long COVID symptom. That is just a symptom of COVID that will get better over time. But the main long COVID symptom that people are and will be suffering from for potentially extended period of time is chronic fatigue. And that's why this book and the remedies in the book should help people with long COVID. Obviously, no guarantees, of course, because COVID is a different virus to the common virus that caused chronic fatigue for millions of people around the world before COVID happened. And that virus is called Epstein-Barr virus, which is a virus that almost everybody's had some point in their life. I think it's like 92% of the entire world's population has had Epstein-Barr virus in the past, also known as mononucleosis and also known as glandular fever in some countries. So there we are. So chronic fatigue syndrome is the main symptom of long COVID, and that's what we know thus far about long COVID. And we can only hope that people with long COVID don't suffer for more than 18 months or 2 years, but we don't know that yet. It could be, you know, it could be a lifelong issue for many people. We hope not, but it could be.
So you're saying people can have long COVID even if they tested negative for the coronavirus, is that correct?
Yes, that's right. So you have the acute phase of the virus, which is feel terrible for 2 weeks or whatever it is. And some people can get extremely ill with lung inflammation and can't breathe, etc. And the blood oxygen level goes really low. Then you get over it and then you test negative, right? After 2 weeks or whatever it is. And then some people find that they don't recover. And even though the negative of the virus, you know, it's long COVID. I mean, you can be negative for a virus, but still have an autoimmune response to that virus. It's called cell mimicry, whereby some of the cells in your body mimic the actual virus, the viral cell, and your immune system adapts to that mimic this viral cell, which is not actually the virus, and your immune, and it stays in your system. It can stay in your system for months or years, and then you have an autoimmune response to that. And that's why you have the similar symptoms to COVID, now known as long COVID. So yeah, you can be negative with the virus, but have long COVID, which could last for many years ahead. And we don't know how long that will last. But if it's like Epstein-Barr virus, which is a different type of virus, because Epstein-Barr does actually stay in, lives in the spinal column of almost everybody. And the reason why people like me had ME was that virus would react and come alive again over time, if you're, you know, in times of stress, times of illness, etc. But with COVID, we think it's cell mimicry rather than the actual virus that causes the long COVID symptoms.
I got some examples for you. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, I had COVID twice.
Right.
And the second time that I had it was over a 2-week period. But after, you know, I had it, I tested negative, but I felt like really fatigued. Mm-hmm. I think part of the reason why is because I have not been eating, eating and drinking anything for like 2 weeks. So I can understand that part. But still, I had some chronic fatigue, issues. And then I had one person who, had COVID 3 times. And the third time that this person had it, she tested negative, but, she felt like, a person that, actually had COVID, the same type of symptoms, everything. And then my dad, after he had COVID, he ended up what doctors called COVID pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he died.
Oh, wow. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. That was, back in June. So.
Right. Oh, wow. Yeah.
I was like, well,
Yeah.
what? So I was like, what is COVID pneumonia? So I've never heard of anything.
Right.
So I mean, I know what pneumonia feels like. I had it before. Believe me, it was,
Nasty.
no joke. It feels like your lungs is about to close in on you.
Mm-hmm.
Bloody, you can't really breathe. But imagine if you have those type of symptoms and you combine it with the coronavirus and you got a deadly 1-2 punch.
Absolutely.
Fortunately, that's what took him out.
Yeah, that's awful. There is a therapy in the book that I discuss, and it is controversial. And, I was in two minds whether to discuss this therapy, but I use this therapy about 3 times a week. And this therapy is called hydrogen peroxide therapy. And hydrogen peroxide, I read a study on it and I've read a lot about it. And one doctor postulated that if everybody had taken hydrogen peroxide via a nebulizer, which is a nebulizer's a small device that turns a liquid into a vapor, a mist that you breathe in through a face mask, that a lot of people could have been saved from COVID through using hydrogen peroxide therapy. Because hydrogen peroxide increases oxygen to the blood, and it does it almost instantly. And people with, COVID with pneumonia had very low blood oxygen levels. And that's exacerbated by low lung volume because the capillaries in the lung would expand. So your volume of your lung shrunk, so you couldn't get enough oxygen into your body, and therefore you're put onto a ventilator. And what hydrogen peroxide therapy does was increase the blood oxygen level almost instantaneously. And for chronic fatigue syndrome, I mean, I use it for chronic fatigue syndrome because it gives me energy, because I have low blood oxygen levels, generally speaking. And it increases the blood oxygen. I've proven it to myself by wearing those oximeters, the little device you stick on your finger, and it shows you what your blood oxygen level is at any one time. It also tells you what your heart rate is. If you stick those on your finger and you inhale hydrogen peroxide, you'll see that your blood oxygen levels shoot up, because the chemical compound for hydrogen peroxide is H2O2, where I'm sure you're aware that water is H2O. Hydrogen peroxide is H2O2, which means you have one extra oxygen atom, and the body breaks it down into that extra oxygen and water. So the water obviously goes in, it comes out as urine, and the extra oxygen atom goes into your bloodstream. And it's just a fantastic therapy for it destroys pathogens and viruses, and it gives you oxygen, which is, vital for reducing inflammation and also giving you energy and getting rid of viruses. And so hydrogen peroxide therapy, it could have saved hundreds of thousands of lives if people had known about it. I believe it's like first line of treatment in many African countries for COVID victims. But the problem is in the States and in the westernized industrial countries, it was deemed too dangerous because it comes in different concentrations. So anything over, I nebulize less than 3% food grade hydrogen peroxide, but you can buy it in 12% or even 30%. And if you drink that, it's obviously really dangerous. So there was this kind of thing, I think it was the Diabetics Society came out and said, oh, this is way too dangerous to ingest, you can't do it. Because people who would drink it, would potentially poison themselves. But in the right dilution, the 3%, it's pretty harmless and extremely beneficial to health. But because there's no money in it, because it's very, very cheap substance, you can buy a bottle on Amazon for like, $10 or whatever it is. there was no money in it. So the medical community couldn't make money out of it. So then, it just hasn't been known about or used in the medical community. And doctors would probably recommend that you don't do it because they know nothing about it. So that was kind of a shame. I mean, if more people had known about hydrogen peroxide therapy, it would have been adopted, by doctors in the US other than just naturopaths and other, the sort of more homeopathic kind of doctors who know all about this substance. If you see a naturopath, you can actually get IV infusions of hydrogen peroxide all over the country, which I would recommend if you have COVID or you have long COVID. What a great remedy that is, a great therapy to try. So that's something I think people should familiarize themselves with. Google it, Google hydrogen peroxide therapy, and don't be put off by the negative comments about how dangerous it is, because it is dangerous if you drink it, but it's not dangerous if you nebulize it, because when you nebulize it, you only nebulize it in 2 ml, which is a tiny amount, at a very low dilution. So that's one piece of advice, one piece of advice I'm happy to give out there, that people should do their own research on that and convince themselves that it is safe for them to use. But I've been using it about 3 times a week for 18 months without any side effects. And it's helped change my life, really. I mean, it's just given me a life back. It's given my energy back, and it's beaten this latent virus and beaten the autoimmune disease that I've had for so long.
So with this hydrogen peroxide therapy that you talk about, who would be authorized to administer that type of treatment? So is it a doctor doing
it won't be, your primary care doctor won't know about it, or if they do know about it, they won't recommend it because they don't want to take on any liability or whatever. What I recommend to anybody who's got chronic fatigue syndrome or long COVID is to find your local naturopath or holistic doctor. A naturopath will look at all sorts of remedies, and not just pharmacological medicines that are doled out by doctors, not just FDA approved medicines, which only the primary care doctors will deal with, because they can't go outside of that, because firstly, they don't have knowledge of stuff that's outside the FDA bubble, and then they're drilled into them, are trained only to stay within that bubble. But a naturopath will go outside of that, look at your lifestyle, look at your eating habits, give you advice on your diet, and they know all about all these alternative therapies that where there's no real money in the therapy itself, other than it actually helps people get better. And obviously vitamin D is one of those therapies where it's very, very cheap to buy vitamin D. Nobody can really make any money out of it. Certainly doctors can't. And hydrogen peroxide is another one of those therapies where it's very, very cheap to administer. Now, I administer it myself because I've researched it so much. I know so much about it that I'm comfortable with that. But if you're not comfortable with that, then go and find a local naturopath and get advice from a naturopath. And if they're a good naturopath, they'll know all about this therapy.
So, I mean, I hope that as far as our healthcare system is concerned, that it's all about the money. It's about doctors making money instead of, making people well. Now, we know that there has been a lot of controversy surrounding by, treatments for COVID-19.
Yeah.
Especially here in the United States, where, where we had all sorts of, things that come out like, people should inject bleach.
Yeah.
There's another pill, I think it's can't think of the top of my head.
Hydrochloroquine.
Yeah.
Hydroxychloroquine. Ivermectin's the other one, which was a horse drug. It was a drug for horses that get rid of parasites from memory. Yeah, I've actually discussed those in the book. I think ivermectin's going through a trial study now in a different country for COVID. But I think, obviously injecting bleaches, don't do that. It's a horrible idea. It's dangerous. And there is a lot of dangerous stuff out there. If you search on the internet, you can do a lot of harm to yourself. So I understand where people are coming from, because hydrogen peroxide sounds scary. And, but it's all about knowledge, right? It's about doing your own research, learning about these things. Ivermectin, obviously, if you take a horse horse quantity supply of ivermectin, you're probably going to do a lot of damage to yourself, and obviously don't do that. Hydroxychloroquine, you've got to look at the studies of stuff like this. Hydroxychloroquine is used for obviously a different ailment, nothing to do with COVID. So you got to do your research and figure out whether there are studies out there that will tell you whether these things work or not. And
I'm mentioning that because former U.S. President Donald Trump had proclaimed that that's what he has taken to overcome, COVID. I'm not sure how true that is, especially, after some of the things that, that you have mentioned that has already been, confirmed. I doubt that highly, and that he was suggesting that, people take that. Of course, some people did, and they end up dead.
Right. That's pretty irresponsible to tout an unproven drug for us.
Yeah, but you have people, with that type of, mentality is being followed by thousands, tens of thousands,
right,
of people. And, some of them who, took this type of advice, have died from it. And, and so the controversy is that, they'll say, well, he's practicing, medicine, without a license, could that be the same if, you try these different, like therapies, like the hydroperoxide therapy that you mentioned in, because I know you talked about there's some controversies to that. So is there a correlation between the two?
That's a good question. With hydrogen peroxide therapy, obviously did a lot of research, and there are a lot of clinical studies out there that prove that it works, where that is not the same for hydroxychloroquine, for example. So it's all relative to whether it works or not, right? And there's evidence out there for whether it works or it doesn't work, and you have to rely on the evidence. So if a politician tells you to take a particular drug because it worked for him, that's pretty irresponsible. But a therapy that I know works, as it works for me, and it works for thousands of other people who use it every day, then that's with anything, you should firstly go to if it's an FDA approved product like hydroxychloroquine, go and see your doctor, because your doctor's an expert in whatever's FDA approved. If it's not FDA approved, go and see a naturopath, because they will probably know all the other medications and supplements that are not FDA approved that can also help you. Just because it's not FDA approved doesn't mean it won't help you. It's obviously, it just means there's no money in it for the pharmaceutical industry. So that's the best advice I can give. If you want to take an FDA approved product that you believe will help yourself, go and see your doctor. If you want to take a non-FDA approved product that you believe may help yourself, go and see a naturopath, or learn about it, research it yourself on the internet. There's plenty of information out there. Don't look at blogs and what people think about it. Actually read the studies. There's a lot of university studies that study all of these things. And if you Google it, you will find those studies.
Let's see. And, in a moment, we're going to be talking about your book. But, I have to talk about vaccines, for a moment. And also want you to discuss, the treatments that doctors have versus the treatments that you have, that you have undergo, and which one that you believe, based on your research, is much more effective. Because, we know that the treatments that doctors, have, people, some of them come out of it, and and some of the patients did not. I think there was a story here that a guy was in the hospital for over a year, things like 381 days, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
Here, he stayed in the hospital for over 380 days. That's roughly over a year.
Mhm.
But he still had like some lingering symptoms. Obviously, he's been dealing with, chronic, fatigue, particularly because, you know, with the type of treatment that, that he had, obviously he wasn't getting any fluids or nourishment, in his body. He's probably been under a ventilator for probably, a long time. So, we have to have a conversation about that too, and how, that affect the ongoing treatment of this virus. So can you like elaborate on that?
Um, Elaborate on what exactly? What do you want me to discuss? What a doctor would.
So basically, we're talking about what in your research and experience, what would be the most effective treatment? Is what the doctors have been doing for the last couple of years, or some of the things that you have already discussed? I know it's in your book.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, first thing is get the vaccine, right? Because the vaccine is proven to be 90, whatever it is, 92% effective against getting the virus in the first place. So I'm not anti-vaccine. You get the vaccine. I've had the vaccine. My wife was head of vaccinations for Novartis, pediatric vaccinations for Novartis for many years. So she's drilled into me how important vaccines are. The first thing is get the vaccine. I would still follow your doctor's advice if you do have COVID. But what my book is about is specifically dealing with the chronic fatigue element of long COVID. So I don't really go into the acute phase of COVID, and I don't really discuss the vaccinations much, because that's not, you can still have long COVID even though you've had the vaccination. In fact, I've actually had a friend who believes that the vaccination she had was the reason she's got long COVID. Because, and I think in her case, and what's probably happened in a lot of cases, was that people, when they had the vaccine, the day they had the vaccine, they may well have been positive for COVID and not known it. Because as you may recall, quite a large percentage of people can have COVID without any symptoms at all. And a lot of people, and the CDC never said this, but what I believe happened to a lot of people was that they had the vaccine on the same time they had the virus. And what that does, of course, it increases the viral load on your immune system and can cause all hell in your body. And so I wish people had tested for COVID on the day they got the vaccine, and if they were positive, don't have the vaccine until they're negative, because the vaccine obviously, adds the viral load to your body in order to get the immune response, right? And so that's the first thing I think hasn't been really discussed in this country, was a lot of people had the vaccination at the same time they had the virus, which was potentially dangerous. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why a lot of people were nervous about getting the vaccination, because they heard these stories about people getting the vaccination and then were really sick afterwards and then didn't really recover. But anyway, I mean, obviously getting the vaccination is an important part of remaining healthy and reduce it. And even if you get COVID, it reduces the symptoms of COVID and may even reduce the chances of getting long COVID. But yeah, I mean, going back to the book, I've got lots of different therapies that if used over time as a combination can help you get over long COVID.
So I took the vaccine, right? And what if what if I take one of these, therapies or treatments, even though, I've been vaccinated. Would that add an extra layer of protection? Or should I do one or the other, or can I do both?
Oh, do both. I mean, I've had, 2 vaccinations and a booster shot, and I've been doing my therapies every day, even through the same day as the vaccination. So no, there's no like cross indication of having a vaccination and doing different therapies or taking different supplements. So no, I mean, this is about, if you have long COVID, you need to do these therapies if you want to get over it, unless you want to ride it out and hope for the best. So it's a choice, it's a decision to make. But you can have long COVID after you've had the vaccination, of course, because millions of people have long COVID. I think it's like 32 or 33% of everybody who's had COVID is now having long COVID, which is a horrendous amount of people. It's millions of people. And what, I mean, I never wrote this book, obviously, for long COVID. It wasn't in my consciousness when I started writing it, because COVID wasn't a thing when I started writing it. And the jury's still out as to whether these therapies that help ME, CFS will help people with long COVID. But because the symptoms are similar, and because both ME and long COVID are of a post-viral malaise problem, then the therapies are probably almost certainly going to help people with long COVID. And that's why I wrote it into the book and incorporated it into the book and discussed long COVID in the book in detail, because I believe that these therapies will help people.
Basically, the originality of the book was to talk about chronic fatigue syndrome and ME, and then when COVID came around, you decided to add that portion to the book.
That's right. Yeah.
So what led you to decide to, add that piece to the book?
Well, it's really obvious that the symptoms are so similar. And then when I studied it more and talked to people with long COVID, it was pretty much identical to what I've been suffering from for years and years. The only difference I could see was people with ME never lost their taste or smell. That was the only difference I could see in the symptoms between long COVID and ME. Also with long COVID, there are obviously, some people have some serious heart issues and lung issues. So that's a different dynamic, I guess. But I think that's more akin to the acute phase of the COVID. But because the symptoms are the same, especially the chronic fatigue syndrome or the chronic fatigue symptoms were so similar that it just made sense. And I believed, and I still do believe, that the book is really going to help people to get over these symptoms. And everything in the book is, most of it's pretty cost effective. Most of them are relatively easy to do. And I'm pretty effective with very few side effects as well. There's nothing in the book that really has any potential side effects. And there's also chapters in there that are going to help people get over other things. For example, people with chronic fatigue syndrome suffer from depression. And I believe that people with long COVID, one of their symptoms is depression, right? Because you can't do what you used to do. You start feeling really depressed. And one of the startling statistics with ME and chronic fatigue was that the average age of death was 58. And the reason for that wasn't the symptoms or the disease, it was because people commit suicide. But there's a 700% increase in the suicide rate for people with chronic fatigue syndrome. And what I wanted to do, one of the first chapters in the book is called Conquer Depression First, because if you're depressed, it's very hard to get better, just to have the motivation to want to get better. And to beat depression was a really big target for me, because I suffer from it myself for a long time. And I know other people are really suffering with depression. So one of the chapters was how to get over depression, and I discussed depression in great detail, and I come up with a plan for beating depression, essentially, because it's very hard to get better from anything if you're depressed. And so that's a really important part of the book. In fact, you know, I may as well tell you now that how I got over depression. And I guess this is controversial in a way, but there's a substance called ketamine. And ketamine, 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 is a psychoactive drug. There's FDA approved for as an anesthetic, and it's been used as anesthetic in operating theatres for a long time. But in lower doses, it almost puts you to sleep, but you're in like a semi-conscious state. But what it does, it rewires the brain, and it's been used now for many thousands of people who are suicidal, and it reverses the suicidal thoughts within sort of about an hour after using the therapy. So I recommend, if people are, you know, really depressed, really, you know, potentially suicidal, is to check out ketamine therapy. If you Google ketamine therapy near me, you'll find the nearest clinic to you that provides ketamine therapy. And there are thousands of clinics throughout the country that provide this therapy, and it can reverse depression just like that. It's an amazing therapy, and a lot of people don't know about it, but I wish they would, because it's, you know, it's really helped me sort of get over my depression, which I suffered from several years, especially when the disease really got a hold of me and it started to really ruin my life. So ketamine therapy is one thing that I discuss it in the book, obviously, but it's worth checking out as well.
So in order for me to really deal with COVID or long COVID, I have to first deal with the depression first.
Well, if you are depressed, yeah. If you're not depressed, then no, you can skip the chapter in the book and do other therapies. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've ever suffered from that. I mean, 70% of people suffer from depression at some point in their life. And if you have a chronic disease, it's a major trigger for depression. If you can't do the job that you used to do, if you can't play with the kids, if you can't do this and that, it affects you mentally. And that mental weight can really, really tax your ability to get on with your life and also get better, because it's really hard to have the motivation, the things you need motivation to get better, right? And without that motivation, it's really hard to get better. So yeah, so dealing with depression, you've got to face it and deal with it, you know, and that's one of the first things you need to do. There's also a chapter in the book on how to get back to sleep, because a lot of people with long COVID suffer from insomnia. And obviously, you know, depression causes insomnia as well. So it's kind of like a compound problem. And then when you can't sleep at night, your fatigue gets even worse in the day, obviously. And that leads to like a downward spiral of depression and insomnia. And so there's a whole chapter on how to get back to sleep, all the little tricks and tips that you need to get back to sleep. There's a whole chapter on that. There's a chapter on how to stay motivated, like motivation. It's like a mini chapter, like a mini book on how to think positive about your disease and how to trick the brain into being positive, like as much as you possibly can. How to create a positive habit. Like for example, you come up with 3 or 4 supplements you need to take every day, twice a day. It's kind of, a lot of people really struggle with actually doing it. They're just having the motivation or creating a habit just to take the supplements at the right time, or any medication. And you know, the book talks about how to create a positive habit, how to set triggers, and how to set rewards so you do things at a certain time of day. So that's important. Also discuss how to exercise when you're chronically ill, because you know, a lot of people lose their muscle mass, lose their bone density, lose their aerobic health as well, declines. A lot of people forget about that because you're very stationary, you don't move. So you get quite sick over time, and your life expectancy can shorten if you don't exercise. There's a chapter on how to exercise when you're sick. So yeah, so the book is more than just a few, talking about supplements, or there's a whole chapter on diet, anti-inflammation diet, what foods to eat to reduce inflammation in your body. So it's pretty comprehensive in terms of, how to, an entire plan as to how to beat these terrible, crushing diseases, that can last so many years.
So were those considered to be like natural treatments versus what the doctors are doing?
Yeah, because with chronic fatigue syndrome, there is no drug. There's no pill. If there was a single pill you could take, then great, but it doesn't exist. And that's the problem I've had for so many years dealing with doctors. I've seen like 20, 30 doctors. They don't know what to do with people with chronic fatigue syndrome. They just say, here's some antidepressants, go away and come back in 3 months, tell me how you feel. Or here's some...
I've seen a lot of commercials where, there's always a pill out for, certain things. And, even though, they say, oh, this pill, it works, but, you have those side effects. And you think that people are, trying to get away from that, and they're saying, what else can I do that is drug-free to,
Right. Yeah.
to be treated for COVID? Because I know that has been a high discussion going on in the last couple of years. People are saying, I'm not going to take the vaccine. I'm going to look for some natural ways. And I know a lot of people mention about, vitamin D. So can you elaborate on, on that?
Yeah, I'm not going to say don't take, your diabetes pills or your heart pills or whatever. You still need to, be careful and take your doctor's advice on stuff. But I completely understand the logic of, I really don't need the side effects of, pill A, B, C, and D or in my body at once. I can understand the logic and why people fear that, because, there's some horrendous side effects to some of these drugs. But everything in the book is pretty natural. Almost everything you ingest or breathe in has a side effect, and that goes down to a burger or a dessert. Sugar has tremendous side effects. So everything that you ingest has side effects. So it's a matter of degrees, right? And but pretty much everything in the book, there's nothing in there that is going to give you any sort of major side effects. There's stuff like, I have a chapter on red light therapy. So red light therapy is literally red lights. It's infrared light, near infrared light, and red light therapy. And that increases your energy levels, it reduces inflammation, it increases melatonin production, which you need to sleep. So red light therapy is fantastic. And I bought my own red lights for my home, and I lie every day for 20 minutes under red lights, and it helps me sleep through the night. And it increases mitochondria function, which is the function that you need to get energy out of your food into your cells. And so it has no side effects unless unless you stay under it too long. Glutathione therapy, that's one of the key therapies in the book. Glutathione is a substance that's natural. It occurs naturally in your body. And glutathione levels in everybody drops as you get older. It just drops and drops and drops. And glutathione, people with low glutathione levels, also there's a study saying that proved that the people who died of COVID had very low glutathione levels. So boosting your vitamin D and your glutathione levels could pretty much reduce the risk of dying from COVID and will increase your chances of getting over long COVID. And there's a whole chapter on glutathione, which is also known as the master antioxidant. So it clears out all the toxins from your system that you eat, that you ingest through processed foods, through dirty air, polluted air, through the polluted water that we drink nowadays that isn't as pure as we perhaps like it to be. So glutathione is another key therapy which has zero side effects, zero. So yeah,
Did you mention, did you get an opportunity to mention your personal testimony?
My personal testimony.
Yes.
What do you mean, my personal testimony?
Well, first of all, how did you get over MA and chronic fatigue syndrome? The first part of question. Number two, was that related to COVID or not?
Yeah, well, the thing was, I got COVID. I got COVID really early on. It was about June 2020. But I didn't know I had COVID. My wife got it. She was very bad. She was symptomatic. My two daughters got it. One daughter was extremely sick with it. The other daughter had a mild case. I got it without knowing I had it, which was shocking to me. I was asymptomatic. And then one of my doctor's visits, they did part of the blood test was to test to see whether I had the antibodies to COVID. And I did have the antibodies. So they said, oh, you had it. You had COVID asymptomatically, which was a real shock to me. And so I had COVID early on in it. And then so COVID itself didn't actually do me any harm, because I think it was because my immune system was already so active. And that was, obviously before I had the vaccination. But what got me over chronic fatigue syndrome was I beat my depression. I took antidepressants, and then I had the ketamine therapy. The ketamine got me over the line. So I'd nebulizing glutathione and hydrogen peroxide 3 times a week. And then I was taking 30,000 IUs of vitamin D every day, which pushed my vitamin D levels right to pretty much to the limit. And those things combined, because I started to sleep really well, those things combined, it just made me feel amazing. And I was getting up every day and going, wow, I'm not tired today. This is unbelievable. And, kind of give me the motivation as well to carry on writing the book, because obviously writing a book takes a lot of motivation, because it takes a long time to get it done. So that's how it happened for me. And that's why I'm so enthusiastic about getting the information out there, because it changed my life. I believe, it can change other people's lives, and it has done. I mean, I've had so many nice messages from people whose lives have been turned around and changed by reading this book and undertaking the therapies. And, if anybody out there wants to talk to me, they can do. If they go to chronicfatiguegone.com, that's chronicfatiguegone.com, they can email me through the website. And, I'll answer any questions that anybody may have. So I'm here for people if they need me.
So what encouragement would you like to give people who are going through COVID, or they're going through long COVID or ME or chronic fatigue syndrome? What kind of encouragement would you like to share to the audience of those who are listening, watching, and who will be watching in the future?
Yeah, don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up. And when you feel like giving up, don't give up. Stick with it. Have hope. Just keep going forward. Get up every day and know in your mind that you are going to get better. Because if you don't believe you're going to get better, you won't. You have to believe you're going to get better to get over anything. If you have a negative mindset and believe it's going to take over your life and ruin your life, it will. And I know, because I've been there, because I've had that mindset myself. And until the switch is flipped in your head, you have to have a positive mindset. You have to have hope, and you have to have belief. Honestly believe you're going to get better. Without that belief, it's really hard to get better.
I have to ask this because you mentioned that with some of the therapies that that they have, that it probably would have saved thousands of lives, right?
Yeah.
So why wasn't this pushed or encouraged?
There's so many reasons why. The first one, and I hate to be cynical, but there's no money in it. There's just no money in hydrogen peroxide therapy. The hydrogen peroxide is virtually free. I mean, it's so cheap to buy. I've got one bottle, it cost me $15, it lasts me 2 years. I mean, so there's no financial incentive. And because there's no financial incentive, there's no money to be made out of it, there's no clinical trials. There's no FDA approved clinical trials. A clinical trial costs about, between the low end, about $30 million to the high end, about $200 million. Who's going to pay that? For what? There's no intellectual property at the end of it. So you can't make any money. There's no money to be made. That's the first reason. The second reason is doctors don't know about it. They're not taught about it at medical school. So they just don't know about it. So they can't discuss what they don't know about. I mean, I know doctors, and I know doctors who actually nebulize hydrogen peroxide, and they still won't tell their patients to do it. So it's a shame, but it's one of those things where doctors don't want to take on any liability, because if people get a bottle of it and drink it, you know, it can be dangerous. So, and we know how risk averse doctors are. I mean, why should they take that kind of risk? So I think that's the problem. There's no money in it. Doctors are risk averse. Doctors don't know about it. But if you Google hydrogen peroxide IV near me, yeah, you'll find clinics that actually provide it all over the States. So, you know, it's out there, just people don't know that it's out there.
So wouldn't it be helpful if doctors actually take an interest in, you know, researching this stuff? Because I'm having a hard time, you know, grasping the concept that the medical profession in general is not about making people well, but you know, it's for them to make a lot of money. I'm kind of disturbed by that.
Yeah, me too.
I just can't, you know, grasp that, you know, concept. I know it's a reality, but I don't know. I guess I'm in denial or something. I just cannot grasp that concept. You know, that it's all about making money and not, you know, making people well. You know, and we know that a lot of times, you know, whenever there's an alternative treatment that comes up, or there's a natural or herbal treatment, you know, that comes up, you know, for diseases, you know, we hear all kinds of, you know, tragic stories, you know,
Yeah,
behind, you know, those, you know, people who, you know, who develop these therapies, you know,
yeah,
done the research. I heard a lot of horror stories, you know, about that.
yeah. But you don't hear the horror stories about all the FDA approved drugs that kill people. I mean,
Exactly.
FDA approved drugs kill, I think it's 200,000 people a year in the United States. It's the second leading cause of death. And
But yeah, you got these pharmaceutical companies, they're making millions.
right. So yeah, and that, you know, but you never hear about that, right? I mean, most people don't know the second leading cause of death in the United States is through taking pills, FDA approved drugs. It's not the herbal remedies that kill people. But I mean, so, you know, doctors go to medical school, and, you know, or I mean, they get hit by sales reps from drug companies coming into their practices 3 or 4 times a week, telling them about the new developments in the pharmaceutical drugs that they then prescribe to their patients. And, you know, there's a financial incentive for them to do that. So there's not for other, you know, remedies. And
right. It's all about, it's
plus,
not about making people well. It's about, you know, it's
well,
about money.
plus their insurance covers them for FDA approved products. So if the doctor gives you an FDA approved product and you die of a heart attack the next week, he's not liable for that, because it's part of the side effects of that product, and it has insurance indemnity anyway to cover that. But if he tells you to take, you know, high vitamin D, and you take 1 million IUs in a day, and you have hypercalcemia and end up dying from it, then he might be liable for that. That may not be covered by his insurance company. So is he really going to tell you to do that? Probably not, right? No. So
they're like special people. They're like special.
that's why you should go to a naturopath, you know.
Right.
If you have a kind of a chronic disease, a complex chronic disease, go to naturopath. If you have a heart problem, go and see your doctor. You know, they're great for that kind of stuff. Break a leg, go and see the doctor. They're great for that, but not for complex chronic diseases. Not for metabolic diseases like diabetes and stuff. You know, see a naturopath because they'll put you on the right diet as well as just giving you the right pills. So, so yeah, I mean, that's the current state of the way it is, and we just have to. You have to be your own health advocate. You know, you have to think for yourself. You can't rely on any one medical practitioner telling you how you're going to get better. It doesn't work that way. So you have to be your own health advocate. You have to do your own research and see the right doctor for whatever you have.
Well, I think that's going to wrap it up here today. You certainly have brought in some great information that, you know, I didn't even know about, you know, as well, you know, some of the things I've been going through personally. And I really appreciate you being on here. And how can people find your book?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. So you just go on Amazon, it's Chronic Fatigue Gone. Just look at Chronic Fatigue Gone on Amazon, you'll find the book. Or you can go to my website, which is chronicfatiguegone.com. And I've got loads of blogs and information on there where you can read more about the therapies and stuff if you're unsure. But the book's free on Kindle, Kindle Unlimited, the book is free. If you want to buy the ebook, it's only $2.99. So it's, you know, it's as cheap as I can get it, keep it. So yeah, not much to lose by buying the book or reading it. So hope people do that. And yeah, and anybody can contact me through chronicfatiguegone.com. Anybody can email me and I'll come back and help them. So, but it's a pleasure to speak to you, Keith. Thanks so much for having me on. I just hope it does help people. I really do, because that's what I'm about. I'm just trying to help other people.
Thank you so much, Jason, for being on the show. And that's going to wrap it up for Talk Show Presents for this week. We have another program on next Saturday. We hope that you'll be able to join us. So basically here, we share information based on, you know, heavily talked about news stories. And we know that coronavirus and COVID-19 is still in the news. So there are still ongoing reports, you know, on that. And, you know, we want to bring that information to you. We also want to bring information that is not necessarily, you know, covered by mainstream media. And certainly some of the things that you have talked about is not covered by mainstream media. So
yeah,
we really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And hope you guys will tune in next week. Until then, enjoy your Saturday afternoon.